Hey everyone, welcome back to Data Lab with Matilda, where we simplify coding one concept at a time. Today we are diving into one of the most important foundations in programming, conditional statements and loops. Whether you're aiming to become a data analyst, software engineer, or just want to understand Python better, this lesson is for you. Conditional statements in Python are written using if, elif, and else. Okay, we are going to be using examples to explain how it is used. Here, you can see that x is equal to 10. The variable x has the value of 10. Okay, and we are going to be checking using conditional statements. If x is equal to 10. Okay, we're going to be using different expressions to check if x is 0, if it's equal to 0, if it's less than 0. Okay, you get the concepts as we go. So yeah, when writing an if statement, a condition has to be met. Okay, so a condition has to be created to be equal to true before an action is performed. Okay. The first thing when writing a conditional statement, you usually start with an if. An if statement comes, then elif, then an else statement. Okay. An elif statement isn't very it's not mandatory to have an elif statement. Okay. But an if and an else statement is mostly needed. So let me give an example. Okay, let's start by assigning another variable to a value. Let's say 8. Okay. If for example, so we've started writing our conditional statements. We started with the command if. Okay. And we are going to be checking using different operations for y. Okay, so let's say if y is equivalent to 2, this is the condition. Y being equivalent to our colon, tell Python that after this condition is met, I want these actions to be taken. Okay, but you want to have an indent here so that everything that is written under the here is equated to this particular condition. Okay, so when this condition is met, I want to print when this condition is met, I want to print y is 2. Okay, so as soon as we check for y, we already instantiated y to be equal to 8. So if y is equivalent to 2, I want this to happen. I want to print the words y is 2. Okay, but because y is not equal to 2, the print is not brought out. Okay, it's not printed out onto your screen. So this is where an else statement comes in. If your if statement is false, doesn't mean that you won't get any output at all. Right, so you'd want to get an output onto your screen even when your if statement is false. So when your if statement is false, you put an else statement, right, to be printed or shown onto your screen, outputted onto your screen when your if statement is false. Okay, so if my if statement is false, I want to print y is definitely not 2. Okay, because it's definitely not 2. So if we should print it, we should get y is definitely not 2. Okay. So an elif statement helps you to create other conditional statements in between if and else. We already understand that if statement, after it equates to a true, right? If your if statement is true, an output is printed to your screen. But if it's false, an else statement, the output of the else statement is printed onto your screen, right? But elif helps you to put other conditions between an if statement and an else statement. Okay, so we could have elif in here to check for another condition. Okay, let's say you want to check if y is less than 20. Is it? We don't know, right? So if it is less than 20, we want to say could be a 10. Okay, so it helps you put conditions in between if and else. Okay, and in this case it is not less than 2. Okay, so let's just put it actually is less than 20. I thought I wrote it 2. So if we should run this, we should get could be a 10. One thing you should put in mind is that in Python your code is run from top to bottom. Okay, so if as soon as one of these statements equates to true, the loop ends and then an output is printed onto your screen. Okay, so if the first if statement was correct, we would have had y is 2 printed onto our screen. But then if it was a false statement, it would move to the elif statement. And if the elif statement is equated to be true, then could be a 10 is printed onto your screen. But when the if statement and the elif statement is false, then the else statement is printed. Let's look at loops. Okay, loops let you repeat a block of code. Okay, so loops just iterate through your code, your block of code until it's a true statement is met. Okay, so usually very important in while loops. But so when your statement is true, you get an output basically. Before we look at the first example, let's look at the second example because we have already looked at lists, so it will be easy to familiarize with the concept. Okay, so we have a list being saved in the variable fruits. Okay, if you remember, I said that every element within a list has it's kind of like an assigned number. Okay, so an index called an index. Okay, so because of these indexes, you can easily iterate through a list or basically any group of elements because it has an identifying key. Okay, so in this case, the key is index that helps you identify or work with an element at a time. Okay, in a for loop, it makes use of the concept of dealing with one element at a time. Okay, so if you can see the statement in here, it says for fruit in fruits. Okay, in this statement, it's referring to each element within the variable within the list fruits. Okay, so for fruit, in this sense, every single element in fruit, we want to print the fruits. Okay, that's basically what this block of code is saying. So for every element, for every fruit in fruits, print that element, print the element in there. Okay, so if we should run this, we should get apple, banana, and cherry because these are the individual elements within the list fruits. With that in mind, let's go to range. Okay, for I, which is now the new name for our elements in range of 5, we want to print iteration and the element. Okay, so in this case, we've got a new command here. Okay, we have a method range here. Okay, range with the value of 5 here. It's telling us that we want to count from 0 to 5 excluding 5. Okay, so we're going to have 0 like here, we're going to have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to have 5 elements starting counting from 0 through to 4, excluding 5. Okay, that's what this is saying. So it's saying that for I, okay, for each element, I is the new element name in range, okay, in the range of 5. Okay, it could have been in the range of 6, it could have been in the range of 7, which would just mean that counting from 0 through to 7, excluding 7, okay, or counting from 0 through to 5, excluding 5, okay. So you should have 5, you should print this, you have 5 different outputs with indexes, or in this case with numbers, so the numbering from 0 through to 4, okay. So when we print this, we should have iteration 0 through to 4 because the range counts from 0, excluding the number in here, okay. Let's go to a while loop. Like I said, a while loop ends. Will I say ends? Yeah, no, it keeps printing out, okay. It keeps iterating, it keeps looping through your code until a false statement is met. Okay, while loops are very tricky. It can just keep printing out if you forget to terminate your code. Okay, so here we have I being equal to 0. Okay, that's the variable and its value. And we have a while here suggesting that we are starting a while loop. So while I is less than 3, we want to print I. Okay, so as long as I is less than 3, we want to print I. So if you don't bring a terminating, will I say, line of code in here, I is continuously going to be less than 3 because I is equal to 0. We already know that. Okay, so we bring this line of code. Okay, for each I you print, after you print an I, we want you to add 1 to the existing I. That's what this line of code says. Okay, in Python you can reassign your variables. Okay, so even though we've assigned 0 to the variable 1 in I, we can reassign it. So we can have I being equal to a new variable. In this case, we want to add 1 to the already existing I. Okay, so I, which in this case is 0, plus 1. Okay, so after a while, so after the first loop is run, I will no more be 0, I will be 1, right? And then we add 1 again after the second loop is run, but I will no longer be 1, will be 0, it will be 2. Okay, so let me print out I. Okay, yeah, we're already printing I, so you'd see that after the first loop, initially I was equal to 0. After the first loop, I became equal to 1. So the second loop, I became equal to 2, until I was no more less than 3. The run code, the code run. Okay, so when I became equal to 3, this code didn't run because I is no more less than 3. Okay, you can remove this line of code to see what will happen. You see that it just keeps running, the loop keeps running. Okay, you keep getting outputs to be 0, and you cannot terminate it because there's no terminating line of code. Okay, I won't do it here because it will take forever to end that. Okay, so loop control statements. Okay, there are basically 3, probably more, but I'm familiar with 3. Okay, so we have breaks that help you exit your code, like it exits your code. Okay, I'm done with this block of code, I don't want it to run anymore. We use continue to skip your current iteration. As I already said, when you are running a loop, for a while loop, you keep iterating to that same block of code until the statement is false, until it cannot be run anymore. Okay, so you can just use continue to skip one iteration, so you move on to the next iteration, skipping that particular one iteration. And pass is just used as a placeholder so that your code doesn't run an error. Okay, so let's use an example here. For I in range of 5, you already know what a range is now. If I is equivalent to 3, you want it to pass and print I. Okay, so if we should run this code, this shouldn't run an error, okay, because we already know that when an if statement comes, then something is supposed to happen. So if a condition is met, an action takes place, right? But then we have no action here. We just wrote the word pass, right? The command pass. But in this case, it's 7 as a placeholder so that we do not run an error. So if we run this code, it should run perfectly, right? But if we should clean pass, just take pass from here and run the same code, we'll run an error. But there's an action that's supposed to take place after the condition is met. We get it? Let's try using continue, okay? What does continue do? Continue skips one iteration, okay? So if I is equivalent to 3, at the iteration where I is equivalent to 3, we don't want anything to run. We want it to skip it and go to the next iteration. So if we run it, we shouldn't see 3 in here. As you can see, the output is 0, 1, 2, 4, skipping the third iteration. Okay. And let's use break to see how break works. Okay. Okay, so break literally exists your code, right? So it should run 0, it should run 1, it should run 2, it should exit the code when I is equivalent to 3. So if we should run this, we have our output to be 0, 1, 2 because it's exiting the code when I is equivalent to 3. So there's one thing you need to know, that a for loop is very useful when it comes to stepping through a group of elements. Okay, so in this case, our range is our group of elements. Okay, because it's counting from 0 to 4. You got to imagine it to make it easy. Okay, and then we have an if statement checking if each element, in this case I, is equivalent to 3, because that is the element name we assigned in the for loop. Don't get too scared. You can easily stack on your conditional statement and your loops. Okay, don't be scared. It's just take your time and read through it. You understand it. Okay, once you can, as I said, once you can read it, once you can say it, you can write the code for it. Okay, for I in range of 5, so for every element in the range of 0 through to 4, if that element is equal to 3, I want to break. I want to exit the code. Now print the elements for me. That's what this code is saying. Okay, so just take your time and read through the code and you realize it's not that difficult. So here you can see that we are making use of a list in here. We have a variable storing lists. We are having our for loop iterating to stepping through each element within our list. In this case, we've named our element number. So for each number within our variable numbers, because that's the variable name we assign to the list. So each element in numbers, each element, if that element is greater than 500, I want to break. And if that number is greater than 150, I want to continue. In the sense, I want to skip that particular iteration. And if that number is greater than 50, I want to print number. Let's add an else statement because why not, right? Else. Let's just print no please. Okay, if you should run this code, let's see what we'll get there. Okay, so after our first iteration, none of the none of the conditions were met. So we had our else output in our first iteration. For our second iteration, one of the conditions were met, so we had an output of 75. So with the third iteration, and the same thing with the fourth iteration. Okay, so take your time and go through the working materials again so that it's easy for you to remember when you need to work again. Okay, so that is it for today. That's a wrap on conditionals and loops. These are the building blocks of logic in Python. If you found this helpful, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for beginner-friendly Python tutorials. Comment below if you want videos on nested loops, list comprehensions, or error handling next. Thank you for watching. Bye.